My name is Ryan Cole, and until 3 summers ago, I made my living as a dive guide and deckhand on a little charter boat out of Cape Vista, Florida. I grew up on that stretch of coast. Salt and diesel are as familiar to me as coffee and soap. I used to think I knew the ocean, and I used to say sharks were misunderstood. Now I live 3 hours inland, and I cannot even stand next to the deep end of a swimming pool without feeling my chest tighten. This all happened over the course of one summer. It did not start with blood and screaming. It started with something that felt like a coincidence and turned into something that was not. Our boat was called the Mariah. 36 feet, twin diesels, 6-pack charter license. We did everything from reef dives to tourist snorkel trips to runs out to a wreck 12 miles offshore where people like to get photos with nurse sharks and Goliath grouper. My boss, an older guy named Frank, had been doing it for decades. He liked to brag that no one had ever been seriously hurt on his boat. The first day I saw that shark, we were on a regular 2-tank morning trip. 4 divers, calm seas, clear water, maybe 60 feet of visibility. We had tied up to a mooring buoy on a low reef about 7 miles out. Depth was around 40 feet. Nothing fancy. I had been leading dives there since I was 20. We dropped in, descended along the mooring line, and the reef came into view under us like a dusty green carpet. Snapper, sea fans, a lazy turtle in the distance. Normal. About 15 minutes into the dive, I felt that strange shift that happens when something bigger enters the scene. Fish tightened up, then scattered. The turtle changed direction and kicked faster. I turned and saw him, a bull shark. Big, maybe 8 feet, thick through the shoulders. He glided in from the blue at our left, not charging, just moving with slow purpose. His back was slate gray, his belly pale, and there was a jagged white scar across his left gill slit that looked like someone had taken a knife to him. The divers saw him a second later. One of them grabbed his buddy's arm. Another lifted his GoPro. I tapped my tank with a clip to get their attention and gave the hand signal for shark. Then I pointed down and motioned them to stay close. Most sharks I had seen in that area did one pass and then stayed wide. This one did not. He came in closer, 30 feet, 20. His eyes were dark and steady. His pectoral fins dipped slightly, then came level again. He swung around behind us, then under us. I kept myself between him and the divers without really thinking about it. I tapped my tank again, pointed at the mooring line, and gave the up signal. Time to end the dive. As we ascended, he followed. Not directly under us, but close enough that I never lost sight of him. At 15 feet, we did a short safety stop. The shark made another slow pass, this time angling upward like he was curious about the strange bubbling things hanging in the water column. When we climbed back on the boat, I did what dive staff always do. I laughed it off and told them how rare it was to see a bull shark that close on that reef. I said they were lucky. I told them how to zoom their footage for social media. But that scar on his gill stuck in my mind. I saw him again 3 days later. Different trip, different group. This time we were at a patch reef closer to shore, where we often took snorkelers. The water was shallower and murkier. The bottom mostly sand riddled with coral heads. We had just dropped anchor when I saw a dorsal fin cut the surface 50 yards off the bow. At first I thought it was a dolphin, until it turned. The fin was blunt at the back and thick. The body that followed had that same wide head, that same heavy look. As it rolled just under the surface, the sunlight caught the scar on the left side. Same shark. He did not come right up to the boat that time. He stayed on the edge of visibility while the clients snorkeled, circling slow, then gliding off, then circling back. I kept everyone close to the ladder and cut the swim short by 15 minutes without explaining exactly why. Back at the dock that afternoon, I told Frank. He nodded like it was nothing and said bulls were always around. He said I was just noticing this one more because of the scar. Then he told me to hose the deck and not spook the tourists. Across the marina, on the other side of the fuel dock, there was another charter boat that did shark feeding trips for thrill seekers. They would run a few miles out, hang a crate of fish heads off the stern, and let people lean over the rail while blacktips and lemons thrashed at the surface. Their captain, a sunburned guy named Vince, liked to toss extra scraps in just to make the water boil for dramatic effect. I started to notice that when they came back in, the seagulls were not the only things following them. More than once I saw a dark shape tracking under their wake all the way to the channel marker. Once, when they were idling near the harbor entrance, a bull shark surfaced so close to their swim platform that its dorsal fin brushed the fiberglass. Even from our boat, I could see the white line of a scar on its gill. I told myself that was the connection. Someone was feeding sharks right off the boat. Sharks were smart. They would remember boats and people as sources of food. This one had probably gotten too bold at some point and taken a hook or a propeller, leaving that scar. Weeks passed. He kept showing up. Some mornings I would wake before sunrise and walk down the dock with a coffee in one hand. The marina would be quiet, sky just turning gray. More than once, I saw a dorsal fin slice through the flat water just beyond the outer pilings, slow, unhurried, looping near the slips where the cleaning tables were, where fish guts went into the water after every charter. The regulars gave the shark a nickname, Scarface. It made them feel like he was a character instead of a wild animal that was getting more and more used to human scents and sounds. One afternoon, a kid from the charter next door tossed a bag of fish scraps into the water, right off their stern, to clear the deck before hosing it. The bag barely hit the surface before a bull shark slammed into it from below. The impact rocked their boat against the dock. The kid stumbled and almost went over. Scarface rolled on his side, jaws clamped on the bag, eyes clouded back. I was close enough to hear the crunch through the water. He shook his head, ripped the bag open, and swallowed half of it before the rest sank. The kid laughed nervously and stepped back. Everyone else on the dock thought it was amazing. That night I stayed on the boat to do some maintenance instead of going home. The marina was lit in patches, pools of yellow where the lamps hit the water, long black stretches between. The surface looked oily and dark under the stern light of the Maria. I was down in the engine compartment when I felt the boat shift in a way that did not match the gentle slap of wakes. A short, sharp jolt. Then another. I climbed up and stepped out with my flashlight. When I swept the beam over the stern, my stomach twisted. Scarface was there. His head bumped gently against the swim platform. He was eating something that clung to the rear ladder, the remains of a snapper carcass someone from another boat had tossed in. His eye rolled up into the light for just a second. It reflected pale and flat. It felt like he was looking past the light and straight at me. I banged the gaff hook on the rail until he slid away into the dark, but my hands were shaking for a long time afterward. The first real scare came a week later at the outer reef. We had 4 divers and a family of 3 snorkelers. The water was a little choppier that morning. Visibility was down to maybe 40 feet. We tied into the mooring, got everyone briefed, and dropped the divers in first. The snorkelers followed with vests and noodles, hanging near the stern, where I could keep an eye on them. About 10 minutes into the dive, I picked up a weird tension. The divers were closer to the boat than usual, making shorter loops. I saw one of them point past me and tap his buddy. Then I felt a bump. Not strong enough to knock me off balance, but solid. Something hit the hull just under my feet, and the whole boat vibrated. The snorkelers squealed and splashed. I heard the father curse under his breath. When I looked down through the ripple and glare, I saw a gray back pass under the transom. Scarface came up out of the shade, right into the patch of sunlight near the swim ladder. Close. So close, I could have reached out and touched him with a broom handle. The smallest snorkeler, a girl maybe 10 years old, kicked without thinking. Her foot brushed his back. He jerked, spun, and for a fraction of a second his head came toward the movement. His mouth opened just a little. Then he veered away and sank back under the boat. I grabbed her vest and dragged her to the ladder. My voice came out tighter than I meant when I told everyone snorkeling time was over. Frank backed me up when I told the divers we were cutting the second tank on that site. We moved to a shallower, sandier spot, closer to shore, where I knew Scarface rarely appeared. I could feel tension crawling under my skin the rest of the day. My body was picking up what my brain did not want to admit. That shark was no longer reacting to us like something wild and wary. He was testing lines, getting comfortable. I started having trouble sleeping. I dreamed of dark water, and the sound of something heavy bumping wood. In late August, we booked a private evening dive. Two experienced divers from out of state. They wanted to do a twilight drop on the wreck 12 miles out. I did not like night or near-night dives on that wreck. Not with what had been happening. But Frank hated turning down money, and he promised me we would be tied up and in the water before the sun touched the horizon. We left the harbor at 4:30. The weather was perfect. Flat seas, no storms on the radar. The divers were a couple in their 30s, both with hundreds of log dives, both excited in that quiet way experienced people get when they are doing something they love. We reached the wreck around 5:15. The sun was still up but hanging low. The water out there was darker even in the day, a deep green blue that went black if you stared long enough. We tied into the mooring and the divers geared up. I dropped a light line with a glow stick attached so they could find the bow easily. They wanted to explore the wheelhouse and then circle the hull. As they did their final checks, I felt that same weight in my gut I had been feeling more and more often. Right before they stepped off the platform, something huge rolled just under the surface 20 yards off our stern. The back was gray. The dorsal fin was thick. The scar flashed white as it caught the low sun. Scarface. He did not rush the boat. He just made a slow half circle, then sank out of sight. I looked at Frank and said we should move to another site. He stared at the empty water for a second, then at the paying divers who were already at the ladder. He swore under his breath and said to keep a close eye on them. They dropped in. Bubbles marked their path down the mooring line. At first, everything was normal. I could see their lights moving as faint ghosts under the surface when I leaned over the rail. The wreck sat in 70 feet of water. They would be down there half an hour. 10 minutes in, something hit the hull. Hard. The Mariah shuddered from bow to stern. A second later, there was another impact near the stern, under the ladder. Frank and I both ran back. I grabbed a mask and stuck my face in the water, holding onto the rail with one hand. The ocean under the boat looked dim and green. The shadow of the hull blocked most of the remaining light. Then Scarface slid into view from under the bow. He was closer than I had ever seen him. His head was almost touching the keel. He was rubbing himself along the length of the boat like a cat running its flank along a couch. His skin scraped the fiberglass with a sound I felt through the soles of my feet. As he passed the stern, his eye rolled, and for the first time I saw his right side clearly. There were fresh marks there, new scars. Someone had tried to hook him or drive him off and missed badly. His skin was torn in 2 places. Still raw, he finished his strange slow rub and then turned sharply, rising toward the surface. His snout hit the bottom rung of the ladder. The whole assembly rattled. The divers were still down. I could see their bubbles drifting up from near the wreck. I shouted into the water, though I knew they could not hear. Frank was already hauling on the mooring line, trying to send a vibration down to get their attention. Scarface circled tight once under the stern, then vanished into the deeper green. We waited. Minutes stretched. Finally, 2 sets of bubbles approached the mooring line. The divers rose into view, calm but with their heads on a swivel. They had seen something. When they reached their safety stop at 15 feet, Scarface came back. He emerged from below them, angling up behind the man. At first, the divers did not see him. Frank swore and told me to get the air horn. I grabbed it and blasted a long, shrill note across the water. Underneath, the woman turned. Her light swept across the bull shark. He flinched at the beam, then curved away. The divers pressed closer to the mooring line and kept their fins tight. The shark made one more pass, closer this time. His snout brushed the man's fin. I saw the plastic flecks. Then he darted off into the dark again. When they climbed aboard, they were both pale beneath their tan. The man showed me his fin. A fresh gouge ran across the bottom edge where teeth had grazed the rubber. They tried to laugh it off, but their hands shook while they stripped their gear. We got off that mooring and headed for home as the sun dropped. You might think that was the worst of it. It was not. The last encounter happened a week later, and it is the one that still keeps me out of the water. We had finished a long day and were coming back through the channel at dusk. The marina was half empty. Most boats had already returned. As we idled past the outer pilings, a guy on a small center console waved us down. His name was Tyler. I knew him from around the docks. He did spearfishing charters and prided himself on taking clients to places he called sharky spots. He shouted that he had a line tangled around his prop and needed a knife hand. It would take 5 minutes. He looked embarrassed, and Frank owed him a favor. So we tied up to him near the channel marker. The sun had dipped below the horizon. The sky was turning that last deep orange at the bottom and purple above. The water had gone from green to a kind of flat metal color. Tyler had a bait bucket hanging over his side, full of bloody water from the fish they had shot. It dribbled a steady stream into the sea. I remember noticing the slick spreading behind his hull and thinking he should clear that before dark. He asked if I could hop in to cut the line while he killed the motor. It was supposed to be quick, shallow water, not much current. I hesitated, then told myself I was being dramatic. I grabbed my mask, fins, and a knife and sat on our stern platform. The water looked almost black below. Frank asked if I was good. I nodded and slid in. The cold hit me first, then the quiet. I swam the short distance to Tyler's boat and ducked under the transom. His prop was wrapped in a mess of green anchor rope. I took a breath, dove, and started sawing. The noise of the engines above was a muffled hum. I focused on the rope. Cut, pull, cut. Little bits floated up past my face. Then the light dimmed. It took me a second to realize something had blocked the last of the sky above me. I looked up. A thick gray shape passed right over the prop. A broad head, a heavy body. Scarface. He glided within arm length of me, completely silent, then curved away under the keel. The water around me smelled strongly of fish blood. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. I pushed up for air, burst into the space between the boats, and yelled that there was a big bull shark under us. Tyler cursed and told me to hurry up. Frank shouted for me to get out of the water. The rope was still half wrapped. If we left it, they would have to tow Tyler in. I made a choice that I have regretted every day since. I went back down. This time I kept turning my head every few seconds while I cut. The last of the rope came free in a tangle. I stuffed the loose ends into the empty engine well and kicked hard for the surface. Scarface hit me before I broke through. I never saw him coming. 1 second the water was empty. The next there was a concussion against my left side like being hit by a small car. His body slammed into my ribs and knocked the air out of me. The knife flew from my hand. His jaws closed around my thigh. Not a full bite, more of a testing clamp, but the pressure was still immense. Pain flared hot all the way to my hip. Instinct took over. I drove my free knee into the top of his head and jammed my fingers into the corner of his eye. His whole body shook. For a moment the world was nothing but gray hide and white bubbles. He let go, and I kicked upward with everything I had. My hand hit the bottom rung of the ladder. Someone grabbed my wrist and hauled. I remember rolling onto the deck and seeing blood spreading out from my leg onto the non-skid. Not a fountain, but a steady sheet. My shorts were torn open. There were deep punctures and a big ragged slash on the outside of my thigh where his teeth had scraped instead of fully closing. Frank wrapped a towel around it and cinched a strap above it. Tyler kept yelling that he could see the shark circling under the boat. The bait bucket knocked against the hull like a bell. We left him still tied to the marker and gunned it for the marina. Later I heard he cut the bucket loose and somehow made it in without more trouble. At the hospital they cleaned the wounds and stitched what they could. I did not lose the leg. I did not die. The doctors and nurses called me lucky more than once. They said it could have been much worse if the shark had bitten down any harder. My body healed. My mind has not. I left the Mariah, left Cape Vista. I could not even sit on the dock without feeling like something was moving under the planks. I saw Scarface one more time. Not in person. In a video someone sent me months later. Tyler had installed a camera off his transom for his charters. One morning they were cleaning fish at the dock and a bull shark surfaced to grab the carcasses. The camera caught his left side as he rolled. The old scar on his gill was there. The newer marks along his flank were there. And there was something else. A pale patch on his head, near his right eye where my fingers had scraped skin away. The shark did not look crazed or wounded. He looked purposeful, calm. He took the carcasses and slid back into the murk, like he owned that space. People in the comments called him beautiful. They said he was only doing what nature intended. They said humans were the real problem. Maybe they are right. We dumped food into the water. We ran thrill rides where people cheered when he slammed into cages. We let kids toss guts off the stern and laughed when he rolled to grab them. We taught a wild animal that boats and the smell of people meant an easy meal. Then we acted surprised when he started investigating us with his mouth instead of just his eyes. I do not hate sharks. I do not think Scarface was evil. He was a predator following what his experience had taught him. That might be the worst part, because when I stand near deep water now, I do not picture some mindless monster thrashing around. I picture something smart and heavy and silent, sliding along the hull and learning the shape of it. I picture an eye rolling up, not with rage, but with recognition. It is easier for me to stay inland. Out here, the only thing that breaks the surface of a lake is a duck or a bass. People ask if I miss the ocean. I say yes, sometimes, but I know that is not the full truth. What I really miss is who I was before the day a shark learned that the smell of me could mean food, and before I learned how thin the line is between a curious bump and a bite that does not stop. My name is Mark Hughes, and for 10 summers I worked as a lifeguard on Clearwater Beach in Florida. I used to think I knew what danger looked like out there. Rip currents, drunk tourists, kids on cheap rental boards drifting too far past the buoys. Sharks were the thing people joked about while they stood knee-deep in the water. They were the reason kids slapped each other with seaweed and screamed for fun. We saw them sometimes, sure, but they stayed out past the sandbar where the water turned from light green to dark. The rule I grew up with was simple. If you saw a dorsal fin close in, you blew the whistle, cleared the water, and the thing moved on. The summer, everything changed, was hot and crowded. It was the year the county decided to loosen rules for the fishing pier at the south end of our stretch. They extended night hours and stopped enforcing the no chumming rule as strictly as before. On paper, the rule still existed. In reality, the officers had better things to do than watch a bunch of guys with coolers and rods. The pier sat maybe 200 yards from my primary tower. On busy weekends, you could see lines of people out there, shoulder to shoulder, tossing bait and dropping lines in the shadow of the pilings. Most people fished clean, some did not. We started to find more empty bait boxes and cut up bait bags in the surf near that end of the beach. The first strange day was in late June. The water was clear and glassy, barely any chop. We had a full crowd spread from the jetty to the rental shack. Families, spring break leftovers, locals. The sky was so bright, it hurt my eyes. I was scanning the water when I noticed a group of baitfish near the pier moving wrong. They were schooling tight, flashing silver near the surface, then darting in sudden bursts. Gulls wheeled over them and screamed. I brought the binoculars up and focused. That was when I saw the first shadow, a sleek, dark shape cut through the school in one smooth line. Then another shape behind it. The fish exploded in all directions. I saw a dorsal fin break the surface for just a second. Then a tail slap. Water fanned out in a white arc. A man on the pier whooped and yanked his rod. Something thrashed on the line, heavy enough to bend the pole deep. I watched a minute longer. Then my radio crackled. The guard from the next tower up asked if I saw anything weird by the pier. I told him what I saw. He cursed and said there were kids swimming right near that zone. We both blew our whistles and waved people closer to the lifeguard area, away from the pier. Most listened. Some rolled their eyes and waded out slowly like they were doing us a favor. The fishermen kept casting. Later, when my shift ended, I walked down to the pier parking lot. A group of guys in sleeveless shirts stood around a cooler, laughing. A trail of pink water ran from the cooler to a storm drain. One of them lifted the lid so his buddy could look inside. There were fish heads and carcasses piled in there, and near the bottom I saw something else. A section of meat that was not fish at all. It looked like pork shoulder, still pink in places and gray in others. Someone had thrown it in as bait. You are not supposed to do that. You are not supposed to drop land meat into ocean water where people swim. But there was no officer around, and I knew if I called it in, they would dump the cooler and say it never happened. So I walked away, annoyed but not scared yet. The second time I noticed something off, it was early morning. I had come in before the crowd to help the supervisor move jet skis. The beach was almost empty, except for a few walkers and the regular old guy who swam laps along the sandbar every morning. His name was Dennis. Mid-60s, lean, always wore the same faded red swim cap. I could set my watch by him. He would step in at the north end, swim a steady crawl parallel to shore just inside the sandbar, and get out near my tower. That morning, the water looked calm, but there was a weird tint to it. Little streaks of pink here and there, near the pier. The tide had carried something north. I hoped it was just bait fish that had been hit by mackerel. I watched Dennis move along the sandbar. His strokes were smooth and even. He was maybe 50 yards from my tower when I saw the first fin. It was small at first, maybe a blacktip or a spinner. Nothing unusual. Then beside it, another fin sliced up, wider and lower. The way they moved made my stomach clench. The small shark darted and turned. The bigger one tracked on a straight line, not toward Dennis at first, just along the sandbar, as if drawn by something unseen. I blew my whistle, even though he was still far out. My arm went up in the signal for him to come in. He stopped, lifted his head, and I pointed sharply to shore, then to my eyes. Danger. Come in now. He hesitated. His hearing was not great. He called something back that I could not make out. Then he saw my expression and turned. The big shark shifted its path. I saw the dark mass slip inside the sandbar and angled toward him. I did not think. I grabbed the rescue board and sprinted into the water. The board bounced hard over the first small wave, and then I was paddling, arms burning, eyes locked on Dennis and that moving shadow. For a few seconds, everything lined up in a way that made my chest feel empty. Dennis, the shark, me between them but too far away. The dorsal fin disappeared. The shadow dropped deeper. My brain started counting even though I did not want it to. 1, 2, 3. A splash. Dennis jerked sideways, kicking hard. Something pale flashed under him. Either belly or surfacing foam, I could not tell. He let out a short, cut-off shout. I reached him a moment later and hooked an arm over his shoulder and onto the board. His face was white. He gasped that something had hit his legs. We got him onto the board and paddled in fast. On the sand, his legs shook so badly he could not stand. I looked for blood. There was none. Just a long red scrape on his calf where rough skin had brushed him. We cleared the beach for 15 minutes. People complained. Kids whined. We called it a precaution. I went home that day still rattled. It did not feel like the usual curious pass we sometimes saw. That shark had shifted its route when Dennis turned. It had cut inside the sandbar, a place they usually did not go in daylight. Over the next 2 weeks, shark sightings multiplied. We saw more fins near the shore, not just by the pier. We spotted shadows under boogie boarders that vanished as soon as we blew whistles. One family came up to my tower to show me footage on their phone. Their teenage son had been filming his sister in waist-deep water. In the background, absurdly close, a medium-sized shark cruised past, maybe 10 feet behind her. No one noticed at the time. They only saw it when they watched the video later. The county finally reinforced some of the rules at the pier. They posted signs about no chumming and no dumping carcasses. They sent officers twice a day for a week. But habits had been formed, and the water did not forget the smell so fast. Then came Labor Day weekend. Every rental chair was full. It was the last big push before school started again. We had wall-to-wall families, teenagers with beach balls, guys throwing footballs too close to other people, and queues at the jet ski stand. The morning passed without incident. Around noon, the wind picked up a little, and the water chopped out. Visibility dropped. White flashes of breaking water made it harder to distinguish anything under the surface. I was watching a group of boys wrestling in chest-deep water when I heard a scream from the south side of my zone. Not the playful kind. High, sharp, cut off. My eyes snapped toward the sound. A cluster of people near the edge of the roped swim area were waving their arms. One woman had her hand over her mouth. A man was dragging something through the water that at first looked like a red cooler. Then it moved in a way coolers do not move. I grabbed my radio and the board again and ran. The other guard, on the next tower, was already sliding down his ladder. We hit the surf at the same time, boards under our chests, paddling hard. The man in the water shouted that something had his son. His voice broke on the last word. The boy clung to his father with both arms, his face gray, his mouth open in a soundless scream. The water around them bloomed red. I did not see a fin. I did not see a tail. All I saw was a twisting motion under the surface right behind them, like someone was wringing out a heavy towel. Then it let go. The boy came free in his father's arms. Blood poured from his left thigh. I saw ragged flesh and white exposed where there should not have been white. We got them onto the boards and hauled them in while another guard radioed for emergency medical and shark protocol. People on the sand backed away from the bloody water line but would not stop staring. Someone filmed with a phone until one of the officers slapped it down. On the sand, we wrapped the boy's leg in towels and used a strap as a tourniquet. He faded in and out of consciousness, eyes rolling. His father kept saying he was sorry. Sorry for taking him out too deep. Sorry for not seeing it. When the ambulance took them away, I realized my own hands were shaking so hard that my fingers left little streaks of blood on my radio. It was not mine. I could feel the stickiness between my skin and the plastic. They closed the beach for the rest of the day. Helicopters circled. Officials used words like incident and rare. They talked about bite patterns and said they believed it was a juvenile bull or a large blacktip. They reminded everyone that the ocean is a wild environment. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the twisting motion in the water behind the boy. It did not feel like a panicked snap. It felt like a focused bite, quick and sure. The boy survived. He lost a lot of tissue, but not the leg. We found out later that his father had been tossing scraps of shrimp into the water while they stood there to attract fish around their feet for fun. He had not known about the bait slick already drifting in from the pier. He had layered one bad habit on top of another without meaning to. The county cracked down hard after that. They shut the pier for a week. They banned all baiting within a certain distance of the public swim area. They sent patrols out on jet skis to run lines of the shore and look for sharks. We still saw them. Some mornings they cruised just past the outer buoys, dorsal fins barely cutting the surface. Some afternoons they drifted inside the sandbar when the water went cloudy. But the big, obvious feeding frenzies dropped off. The fishermen got scared enough of fines to stop dumping gross stuff right there. My last shift came at the end of that season. It was not planned that way. I told myself I would come back in the spring. Then winter came, and I felt relief that I did not have to look at the water every day. When hiring started again, I did not return the call. On my final afternoon, I sat alone in the tower while the sun hung low and the crowd thinned. Dennis swam his slow, careful laps in waist-deep water for the first time since the bite. He stayed strictly inside the line where the water stayed the color of weak tea, not the darker green beyond. I watched the sandbar out past him and saw nothing. No fins, no shadows, no sudden bursts of baitfish. But I knew they were there. They do not leave. They just adjust. Sometimes at night now, in my apartment far from the beach, I still hear the faint echo of whistles in my head. I see the scarred faces of regulars. I feel the phantom pull of a board under me as I sprint through choppy water toward screams. People tell me they still swim at Clearwater Beach all the time. They say it is safe. They show me selfies with toes in the surf and bright umbrellas behind them. They say the boy healed. They say the rules are stricter now. I nod. I smile. I do not tell them about the clouds of bloody water that rolled in from the pier that summer, or about the way those sharks started slipping inside the sandbar like the line we drew meant nothing. Sharks are not villains in a movie. They are not mindless either. They learn patterns. They go where the food is. That is the part that gets me now. We drew a line in the sand and planted flags in the water and told everyone it was safe on this side. But no one ever explained that our lines mean nothing to what swims beneath. We kept feeding the dark, then acted shocked when the dark reached out and took a bite. My name is Caleb Turner, and until 2 years ago, I worked as a research assistant for the State Marine Lab in Port Ashton, South Carolina. I was not a scientist yet, just a data grunt. My job was to record coastal shark movements, tag juveniles when we found them in the estuary, and help boat crews check drift buoys along the barrier islands. It was quiet work, predictable. I liked the ocean because it was the one place where everything made sense. That changed the summer an old bull shark started following our boat. Not once, not twice, again and again, until I felt like I was the one being studied. It started in June, during a heat wave that made the marsh smell like warm salt and sulfur. We had been getting scattered reports of swimmers spotting a large shark near the inlet on days when the water was usually too warm and too shallow for bulls to come so close. At first, we wrote it off as misidentification. Every fisherman on the coast claimed he saw something huge every week. But we logged the calls anyway. When the same description came in 3 times in a row from 3 different people, our supervisor, Dr. Miller, sent me and my friend on the crew, a guy named Ian, to check the area. We took the lab skiff, a small 20-foot center console with a bench full of tagging equipment. The tide was dropping, and the inlet mouth shimmered with that muddy green water that comes when current shifts fast over sand. We did not see anything at first. Then Ian pointed toward the breakers. Something moved just past the foam line. It rolled, slow and heavy, a thick head, a wide back. The water parted in a V as it moved. The shadow dipped and surfaced again near the channel pole. A bull shark, easily 8 or 9 feet. Ian reached for the tagging pole, but I shook my head. You do not stick a metal pole into a bull shark that size unless you want to end up explaining to someone why you are missing fingers. The policy was simple. Only tag juveniles or subadults unless you had a full team and a bigger boat. The shark swam a long arc around us, never coming fast, never darting, just circling. Its dorsal fin cut the surface 3 times, and on the last pass I saw a pale mark on its right flank just behind the gill slit. A healed wound in a sharp crescent shape, like a propeller strike or a deep hook tear. We logged the sighting and headed back. 2 mornings later, we launched near the same spot and found the shark again. This time it followed our wake. If we slowed, it slowed. If we drifted, it drifted. When I leaned over to pull in a buoy to record the temperature sensor, the shark rose just enough that I caught the pale gleam of its head under the surface. Not lunging, just there. I told myself it was because of the bait bucket we used for other species. I secured the lid tight. We did not drop anything overboard. The shark stayed anyway. When we returned to the dock that day, one of the commercial captains leaned over the rail and whistled. He said a huge bull had been cruising near the trawlers early that morning, taking discarded bycatch before the gulls could reach it. Showed no fear at all when he banged the hull. He asked if we had seen it. I said yes. He grinned and said those big ones get smart fast. They figure out which boats drop what. After that, they follow you like dogs. I laughed, but my chest tightened. The third encounter came on a day I will never forget, because it was the first time I felt real fear in the water. We had been assigned to check 2 buoys deep inside the estuary. The channel wound through marsh grass and oyster beds, so thick you could hear the crackle of life under the surface. The water there was brown, opaque, nothing like the green near the inlet. We had anchored near a narrow bend, and I slipped into the water, wearing fins and a mask to clear some fouling from a sensor line snagged on a submerged branch. The depth was maybe 8 or 9 feet. Not deep, but dark. Underwater it felt like twilight. Particles drifted past my face. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I freed the line, surfaced, and handed it to Ian. I went back down to double-check that nothing else was tangled. When I turned, a movement in the murk caught my eye. A shape passed 6 or 7 feet behind me, too big to be a dolphin, too low to be a manatee. The The water moved in a slow ripple. I froze. My chest tightened. I kicked once upward. Controlled. Not frantic. Ian leaned over the gunwale and asked what was wrong. I kept my voice level but told him I needed to get back in the boat right now. As he reached out for my wrist, the shadow rose under me. I saw the blunt head, the thick shoulders, the pale crescent scar. Scar shark, Ian said quietly once I hauled myself over the rail. Same one, same size, same mark. We pulled the anchor in record time and did not stop until we reached open water. The next morning I told Dr. Miller. She listened, frowned, and said we needed more documentation. She suggested we set up remote cameras on a few buoys and record whether the shark kept tailing our skiff or if it was just coincidence. It was not coincidence. The footage from one of the cameras near the inlet showed the shark passing close to the buoy less than 5 minutes after our boat left it, then circling the empty buoy twice before swimming slowly in the direction of our route. An animal that size should not have the energy to waste on motions like that, not unless it expected a reward. The next week, the encounters escalated. We were checking offshore traps used for tagging smaller species when the shark approached again. This time it came so close to the stern that its dorsal fin tapped the motor housing. The sound echoed through the hull like someone knocking on a door. Ian cursed and backed the throttle to send a burst of water into the shark's face. In any other case, the animal would have veered away. Not this one. It slipped under the engine, rolled so its eye broke the surface, then vanished into the deeper green. The hairs on my arms rose. Something about that eye made the space between me and the water feel too thin. Things got worse when the shark started showing up near the swimming beaches. One Saturday, a call came in from the county. 3 beachgoers had spotted a large shark cruising parallel to shore. They described it as thick-bodied with a pale scar. They said it came within 20 yards of the roped-off swimming area before turning back toward the inlet. The county asked us to send someone to monitor for an hour. I drew the assignment. I stood on the lifeguard platform with binoculars and watched the dark shape slide through the shallows again. Not rushing, not hunting, just passing close enough to make every instinct in me go tight. Bathing families stayed ankle-deep that day whether they knew it or not. By July, I was getting headaches from stress. Ian complained that he dreamed of dorsal fins cutting through marsh grass. Our boat logs had page after page of sightings involving the same shark. One afternoon, we pulled up a drift buoy that had been torn loose from its anchor. The thick rope was frayed in a neat arc that matched the width of a large jaw. There were scrape marks on the buoy itself, like something had pushed or dragged it. Something was changing in that shark's behavior. He was interacting with objects, not just stalking fish. He was treating human equipment like obstacles or competition. The day things finally snapped, we had gone out to tag juvenile blacktips near the outer breakwater. The wind was light, the sun high, the waves small enough that even the birds seemed relaxed. We had caught 2 juveniles, tagged them, and released them without issue. The third line we set jerked so violently that the rod holder bent. Ian shouted and grabbed the rod. The drag screamed. Whatever was on the other end was too big, way too strong. "Cut the line," I said. He hesitated. "Cut it right now." The line snapped before he could. The recoil almost hit him in the face. The water near the breakwater churned once, then went deadly still. When the shadow rose under the boat, I already knew who it was. Scar Shark, right under us. Close enough that I could see the scars as he rolled his head. He bumped the hull hard. Then again, then a third time. The skiff rocked so sharply that I grabbed the rail to keep my footing. Ian shouted at him, threw a bucket of water at him, hit the side of the boat with a boat hook. The shark swam a short, tight circle and then slammed his head into the hull again. This time, the vibration ran straight through the deck into my knees. We gunned the motor and sped away, leaving a white trail behind us. The shark followed for almost 100 yards before sinking away. Back at the lab, Dr. Miller stared at us like she did not know whether to believe the full story. But when she inspected the hull and saw the fresh gouges, she ordered our boat off that route for the remainder of the season. 2 days later, a fisherman was bitten at the inlet. He survived. The bite was deep, but not catastrophic. He had dropped a bucket of bait into the water from waist-deep surf, and something hit him hard enough to knock him over. The description of the shark matched ours. Wide body, pale scar, approached without fear. The county closed the inlet for a week. By then I had already turned in my notice. I moved north, took a job far from the coast, and told myself I was just burned out. But late at night, when the world gets quiet, I still hear that hollow thud of a massive head hitting fiberglass. People send me articles now and then about a big bull shark still being spotted around Port Ashton. They say it behaves strangely. They say it bumps boats. They say it follows kayaks without attacking. Some people think it is curiosity. Others think it is conditioning. I think it is memory. I think that shark learned to expect food where people were, learned the sound of our engines, learned the shape of our hull, learned that we always turned away instead of engaging. And I think if it had taken one more step in what it was learning that summer, if it had bumped our boat a few more times, if one of us had slipped or fallen in the water during one of those encounters, the story I am telling you right now would have a very different ending. But it does not. I am alive. I am far from salt water, and I intend to stay that way.